what Angela Merkel did when she opened the doors, anybody welcome, no questions asked. That's exactly what's happening in Wales. It wasn't a disused army base, it was used, and it was going to be used to house 300 migrants in a town of 400 people. Certain things start happening. Children being messaged by men in the camp, come and meet us up the skate park. Weapons being made, riot vans having to go in, there was mass brawls. One of the cleaners had to lock herself in a cupboard. 20, 30 men trying to get at her. They don't want us to speak to these people because they tell you the truth. They told us that they were escaped from prison in their country. Why do you prefer it here to France? We get nothing in France, you get everything here. Well, as you know, in the UK, you can have sex age 12. Keir Starmer said that Wales is the blueprint. Absolute communism. Nanny state, 20 mile per hour speed limits in Wales. Surveillance state, there's CCTV everywhere, facial recognition everywhere.
How did you report on the BLM protests?
With a stab vest. There's a lot of Palestine marches at the moment, every Sunday guaranteed, all through the middle of Swansea. You know the song they sing, From the River to the Sea. What river and what sea? They have no idea.
The grooming gangs, the migrant hotels. What are Wales hiding?
I want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors, Gold Seal. I use their products every single day, and now I finally get to work with them. I use their products for anti-inflammatory, reduced anxiety, better sleep, and mental clarity. I'm going to put a link to their website in the description, along with a 10% discount code for you to take advantage of. Go and have a look at their website, see if there's anything in there for you. I hope you enjoy this week's episode, and good health.
Dan.
Liam.
Thank you for coming on.
No, thanks for inviting us.
Let's find out what the consequences are of reporting the truth in your hometown of Wales. So what is the Voice of Wales and what is it you do?
Well, Voice of Wales is basically media. It's old school journalism. It's the journalism that I used to see growing up, where you'd see reporters outside houses trying to question politicians, and that's what media and journalism should be. We found a big gap in the market for honest, truthful journalism in Wales because every media outlet that you can think of is funded directly from the Welsh Government. So, you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. We know that, let's just say, for example, Wales Online, is a perfect example. They run their articles about the Welsh Government through the Welsh Government before they publish. Whereas what we do as journalists is criticise and hold people to account, people in power to account. So that's basically all we do. We're just old school journalists holding the people in power to account.
So is that your main target, the government, or do you cover other stories?
Everything. The government, normally it all lies with the government. The decisions and the failings that are happening in our country, it lies with the government usually. But it's the whole establishment. So, the two-tier policing that you've seen a lot more in England now because you've got a Labour government. We've had that in Wales for over 25 years. So, that isn't new to us. So we'd question that as well.
This is going to be interesting then, because you can give us a few cautionary tales. You can certainly let England know what to expect, what's going to come. So going back a little bit before you started the Voice of Wales, or how was the Voice of Wales born? How did it all begin?
Well, I started my journey, I suppose, watching Tommy Robinson. And I was watching his, this is going way back when he was on Periscope and, Twitter and things like that. And that's when I was alerted to, funnily enough, it was my father that showed me that. He said, I've seen this guy, quite controversial apparently, but I agree with everything. He showed me the phone and it was Tommy's Twitter account. I was like, I'll start looking at that. So that's what woke me up to what's actually going on. But then Brexit came along. And that was the first vote I ever made. I hadn't voted. All I knew about politicians is they're liars. And so I'm not interested in politics, didn't want to know. Brexit came along, Leave, Remain. I looked at the arguments. I thought, well, this is not loyal to any party. I can be not a member of any party and still vote, which I did, and I voted to Leave. And then I watched. I'd never really put politicians under a microscope and watched what they do. But I watched how they treated my vote. How every single, my own MP, even though where we live in Swansea voted to leave, Wales voted to leave, the UK voted to leave. And at every level, from council to MP, Welsh Parliament member, Prime Minister, they were all trying to make out as if we didn't know what we were voting for. And I just thought, well, if they're doing this about this, which is a huge, everybody's talking about Brexit, what else are they doing that people aren't talking about? What don't people know about that they are just being able to get away with? So that's what turned me into being all over politics is Brexit and watching how they just basically mistreated everybody's vote. And it was an insult to democracy. I'm very pro-democracy. I come from, my grandparents, military, and I grew up learning about the war and things like that. And I was always told off for not voting, basically. People died to give you that vote. You should go and vote. So when I watched the how they treated democracy, I was quite annoyed, So we started street movement, sort of activism, and we called it Leavers of Swansea. That was just myself. And it was to try and get the people of Swansea together, the people who voted to leave, and give them a voice, bring everybody together, and have demonstrations where we can express our dissatisfaction of what our MPs are doing. This was my first taste of politics and first taste of the opposition, then, so to say, the peaceful lot, the ones on the left. Within a couple of days of the group being set up, we were having headlines put up against us, Leavers of Swansea, vile racist bigots. And we would be, this was all over Welsh media calling me a vile racist bigot because I dared to question what they're doing regarding Brexit and having protests. And, we called the MPs who went back on their promise to uphold the results. We called them traitors. Now, that word seemed to really not sit well with the people in power in Swansea. So that led to, police visits, people concerned of how what we're going to do next. When realistically, all we were doing is holding a demonstration. But it was alien to Wales. Wales didn't see this sort of activism, or hasn't seen this sort of activism in a very long time. So instantly, we were on the radar. And because we saw how the media were treating us, and then we started looking into the media and finding out, they're getting direct funding from government. So they're state-sponsored media. So
how did you find out those details?
Freedom of information requests. So Wales Online, a certain percentage of their income, but large amounts as well. We're talking big numbers, and even smaller media outlets, Nation Scumry, we call them, Nation Cymru. They get in funding direct from the Welsh government. I think they're £80,000 over 4 years. Which is big money, but for a small company to be given 80 grand. You're not going to then start criticising the person that give you the 80 grand, are you? You're going to be very much in line and making sure the next time it comes around, you're going to get another 80 grand. So they play by the book, they play by the Welsh Government guidelines, and they very, very wary about criticising them at all. And that's when we thought, well, there's an opposite opinion. There's obviously a lot of people out here who are disassociated with the way the country's being run, the politics, the way they treat the people. And there's a gap in the market for honest, truthful media or alternative media, giving an alternative view. The alternative view, surprise, surprise, was just the truth. And it was just factual information that we found out, and we were presenting it to people. But obviously this, again, the Welsh government, Welsh politicians, Welsh councils, they'd never experienced this before. So all of a sudden, you've got social media, and you've got, councillors' expenses, for example, when you get in big lists of them claiming for laptops, PCs, iPads, all in a year, all claiming it on the council, which we are paying for, and we're presenting it to the public. That's information that the public never knew about before, and the politicians have never been held to account before. So even little things like that, instantly you could tell they really wanted to shut us up.
But you decided not to shut up. You decided to form your own media company. Yeah,
the majority of Wales voted to leave, which led us to the name Voice of Wales, because we needed to give the people of Wales a voice. But even that, again, that was criticised, how dare you call yourself the Voice of Wales, you're not the voice of us, blah, blah, blah. And it's orchestrated, it comes down from the MPs, down to the councillors, then down to these paid agitators, the brown shirts, I call them, stand up to racisms, hope not soap, and all that lot. But yeah,
hope not so.
Yeah. I got to give credit to one of the boys, Charlie, for that one, because he said it the other day, and I thought I'd keep in that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, hope not soap is a blinder. How quick did you come under attack once you formed the Voice of Wales?
Oh, instantly.
And what were the attacks? Because I tell you for why I ask. Because I saw a BBC hit piece on you, the Voice of Wales.
Yeah.
They tried to paint you out to be monsters, and they tried to make you guilty by association. And they were bringing people like Katie Hopkins, Tommy Robinson, the Proud Boys. Yeah. Then they were using big buzzwords like links to terrorism.
Yeah.
Really painting you to be a bad person. When I think now, years down the line, the people that they were pointing the finger at, presenting them as bad people, have been the truth tellers. And we've seen public opinion sort of do a complete 180. So if people was to watch that now, that would probably not have the desired effect. But at the time, what kind of effect did that have on you?
We were calling out things like the Nation of Sanctuary. Now, we were called conspiracy theorists. We were stirring hate because it was untrue. Up until, 2 years later, and then it's like, oh yeah, it was true, actually. We are going to do this Nation of Sanctuary thing, and we have been doing it for the last 2 years. And just to get anyone, who doesn't know, Nation of Sanctuary is what Angela Merkel did when she opened the doors for Germany, and was everybody in, anybody welcome, no questions asked. That's exactly what's happening in Wales. So because we were saying things like that, and we were alerting the public to what's actually going on, everybody sees it now, and you're absolutely right. Today, if people watch that video, it would have a different effect than it did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because people are genuinely seeing the changes in their towns and cities. But the hit piece itself was off the back of, you had this Museum Arts Council of Wales, and their whole window display was Black Lives Matter. And I was looking, you've got Barack Obama, Uzo Uobi, who's another, she's a far-left activist from Wales. And I'm just thinking, well, this is the Arts Council of Wales. Well, this is what Wales is going to become. Now, because I said that, obviously that makes me extraordinarily far-right, racist, for pointing out, well, if you have a Nation of Sanctuary and you're inviting everybody from everywhere in the world, this is what Wales is going to become. This is how it's going to happen. But it's all of a sudden that's on BBC. And again, this is early days. So, we've had a few headlines, local media saying things about us, and we can deal with that. But then this was all over national television. It was supposed to be for 3 days. They did a 3-day piece. By the Friday, they actually cancelled doing the last day because all it was doing was pushing people to our channel because we still had YouTube at this point. So probably not the right thing to do, but every time we went up 1,000, because we only had 4,000 followers. So this is, that's tiny, minimal. But that shows the level of allowance they have for dissidents. They grow in. They grow. They got 4,000, get rid of them. So the hit piece came out, and it's all over national TV, radio, breakfast shows, evening shows, everything, right? Looking back now, it's quite funny. But when then you have your neighbours, for example, people who live next door to you, who, you don't know, seeing these things, it does start to play on your mind, and you're thinking, I got to go down where I live in Swansea, it is very multicultural. The area I went to school in, the Harvard, is predominantly Pakistani Muslim, and now I'm being broadcast all around that area that I'm a racist, I'm a, far right, this, that, and whatever. So it does take its toll. But I suppose then you've got to ask, is it worth it? Because a lot of people can throw in the towel. A lot of people do throw in the towel. People come and go all the time. But we'd committed. And, ultimately, if we was to back down, we're admitting defeat. And I don't think I know we're not in a position to do that because we're right. Everything that we've been warning about for these years that we've been going, everything is coming true bit by bit by bit.
It's good that you didn't feel intimidated at all, or if you did, you held the line anyway. And you said that Swansea or Wales is multicultural, and that was going to be my next question, because you don't get to see a lot about Wales in England. It's almost like they're hiding something from England, certainly within the mainstream media outlets. What do you possibly think that could be? You've said it's multicultural. I didn't know. So I'm assuming it's all, especially if you've got like an open border policy, I'm assuming you've had all the problems that we're now seeing, the grooming gangs, the migrant hotels. What are Wales hiding?
Keir Starmer said when Mark Drakeford was in power, Mark Drakeford's the ex-First Minister of Wales, he resigned obviously just before the COVID inquiries started and all that. So, timely done. What Wales is hiding, Keir Starmer said that Wales is the blueprint. Before he was elected, before you had a Labour government here, or we've got a Labour government in Westminster, he said that if they was to be elected, Wales is the blueprint. Now, that blueprint is basically, absolute communism, nanny state. You got 20 mile per hour speed limits in Wales, where, and the cameras, surveillance state, there's CCTV everywhere, facial recognition everywhere. And I believe that Wales is, just like the UK seems to be the hotbed of the testing area for all this madness across Europe, or across the West, actually. Wales is where it starts. And then in Wales, it seems to be that's where the nuclear test site is. All the bombs are dropped there. And then when we know it's working, we'll bring it all into England. So people don't talk about politics in Wales, and it's done deliberately. Last Senedd elections, last Welsh elections, 46% of people turned out to vote. So that's, under half, which is a failure. But that's because it's done by design. People in Wales aren't interested in politics. So they can push anything through without any pushback whatsoever. And then that's something that Labour in Westminster can point to say, well, they did it in Wales. Look, 20 miles per hour worked really well in Wales. And then they can bring it into England. Or the Nation of Sanctuaries worked well. Look, they're all working in the NHS. They're doing this, that, whatever. We'll do it in England. So it's the test site. So what they don't want is someone like us in Wales at the test site, at ground zero, saying, look at this. And that's why we've been taken off every platform pretty much. Thank God for Elon Musk bringing us back on X.
Yeah. Wow. I had no idea. That it was going on in Wales before it was going on anywhere else. So when you formed the Voice of Wales, were there any grooming gang scandals, actual human beings that you targeted, that you gathered evidence for, that you reported to the police? I mean, how was it all dealt with?
Yeah, so before Voice of Wales, this was after watching Tommy, and then remember his last time he went to Salisbury for the Kangaroo Court, where he was released. Leeds, I think it was 2018. That day that he got arrested was the day I was like, right, we need to do more now. So I went and joined the local, the football lads, the Democratic Football Lads Alliance, and helped set up one in Swansea. We instantly started getting information about grooming gangs that were happening. St. Helens Road, the one I mentioned earlier on, Muslim area or Islamic area in Swansea. We were instantly getting, let's just say, reports then of this happening, St. Helens Road, the chicken shops and houses. So we had people then monitoring houses, collecting the evidence, because we know if you report it to the police, they don't do anything. They just ignore it. So we gathered as much to make it that they had to take it. We've got number plates, we've got times, we've got people, we've got children, we've got how many people are going in, how many people are greeting them. You've got, a load of evidence that it is impossible for them not to go ahead and at least investigate. There's one particular example. The police did go and investigate. They went to the house and they interviewed the men in front of the children. So the children were there and they told them that they'd be back the next day. The next day, the house was empty, settee, furniture, bedding, all out on the streets. All evidence contaminated, the house was empty, it was gone. So they were just let to get away with it, and nothing else happened from then. So that's again, this is what is all coming out now about how the police turned a blind eye to this sort of stuff. This was happening, it's been happening in Wales as well. But people like yourself, you said, you just don't expect it. You just don't expect that to be happening.
Nah, and I'm sort of grateful that there's guys like you out there that have done the independent journalism, the alternative media, because, that's what opened my eyes to actually not believing what the government say, not believing what you read, not believing anything you hear, unless you see it yourself. And the power of a mobile phone or just your own camera is phenomenal. Yeah, I'm very grateful for guys like you, which is why it's a joy to have you on. I hope you don't get me cancelled, but we're still going to roll with it. You mentioned the DFLA. Yeah. So, for people that don't know, what is the DFLA? Yeah, the DFLA is the Democratic Football Lads Alliance, and what this was formed just after the Football Lads Alliance. It then turned into the Democratic Football Lads Alliance, and it was in the aftermath of the Manchester Arena bombing with the Ariana Grande concert, and it was a group of football lads all over the UK. It was the biggest movement I think I've seen in regards to terrorism and. That's what the whole thing was, against all kinds of extremism. No matter what it is, it wasn't just Islamic extremism, it was all kinds of extremism. And that's football rivals all coming together, putting aside their differences for the bigger picture and the greater good. Absolutely. You'd have, rivals, you'd have Tottenham and Arsenal walking together. I remember them wheeling their the flower displays with the club badges next to each other. You'd have Swansea and Cardiff, bitter rivals, and they would be, shoulder to shoulder next to each other. Whereas, before all this, they would have been trying to kill each other on the terraces. So, for that rivalry to be put aside for the more important goal was something really, really special. And I think it terrified the establishment with how big this was. Because this isn't, like you see in now, the far right these days are the elderly women with the prams. These lads were football lads. They didn't mind getting in a bit of a tussle on the weekends, but they were so well behaved.
You know, people, they came out respectful, like we've seen in all the marches that we've been to. Very respectful, no trouble whatsoever. And that, again, it destroyed the whole narrative. And that was obviously, you know, shut down quite quickly. A lot of people, head people within the movement, start again targeted, attacked, jobs, you know, things like that. And then ultimately it fizzled out because, you know, back then, being called a racist could actually do something, you know, it could actually make you lose your job.
That word's lost its kick now, isn't it?
It has, yeah. But they still use it. You know, they still try their absolute best. But back then, it did put a lot of people off and the movement fizzled out, which was a shame. But I think, you know, timing is everything. I think, you know, all that had to happen. Where we are now, you know, we're in a position now where you've got the grooming gang cover-up being admitted and discussed in Parliament, which is huge. I would, you know, 3-4 years ago, I never thought that would have happened. So all these little things, all these groups, all these movements, everything that popped up along the way, I think all really played their part.
And you see all the people that you've come under attack by, be it emailing your place of work, clients. I mean, I know what the radical left tend to do from the comfort of their armchair. They don't do a great deal more than that. But, I mean, in Wales, like, who are these people? Who's funding them?
Yeah.
And what kind of problems do they cause you?
The worst thing about it is a lot of them are council workers, social workers, teachers. You know, a lot of them work with children. A lot of them work within unions. You've got the National Union of Teachers. They go there as well. You know, ultimately, the middle class communists. You know, these people. You know, without naming any names, which I can't remember, not because of courtesy for them, but there's one of them there, 85 grand a year job, you know, in the council as a social worker. But then he's obviously a communist at the same time. So, it kind of doesn't make sense. But they're in quite high positions within government, within unions and within education and things like that. They get their funding directly again from the councils. So obviously it's a Labour council we've got in Swansea. So they would get funding through anti-racism campaigns and things like that. And it's all, you know, it's all backhanders and money moving around because they can, you know, because they can apply for it through grants because they're a anti-racist movement. And then also you get it through Unison and, you know, other unions, other trade unions in the local area will also give them funding. You know, they all got lovely brand new signs every single time. They always say the same thing, but lovely and brand new every single time. And it's not a cheap organisation that they've got. You know, there's no expense spared. The council puts stages on for them, you know, and they'll have a big stage for them to go up and have a platform. If they're ever counter-protesting us, if we've got an event, the council will come along and they'll pop a nice stage up for them, put their branding all over it. The head of Swansea Council, Rob Stewart, Labour, will speak at these events, you know, to these people. So they've got full backing and not just backing, authorisation and permission by the governments to do what they do. You know, and what they do is, I would say, is nothing short of fascism. It's good. I refer to them as the brown shirts, the Nazi brown shirts, because they basically work on behalf of the government. You couldn't see a councillor going into venues saying, if you host these, we're going to be here in hundreds of people, we're going to leave you all bad reviews, we're going to destroy your business. The councillors can't do that, so they send in their brown shirts, the Stand Up to Racisms, the Hope Not Soaps, all that lot, Far Right Watch Wales. So they will then hound venues. If we do like a question time show, answer time we call it, where we got 5 good panelists, 1 host, people in the audience to ask live questions. In a lot of the cases are candidates for upcoming elections. So they, you know, it's not, you know, this is a democratic process. A candidate should be allowed to go on a panel show and speak. However, you get the police going into the venue, or you know you're hosting, don't you? You get the council going into the venue. When's your alcohol licence due? Then you get the Stand Up to Racisms. If you host them, we're going to turn up in the hundreds and we're going to destroy your business.
I tell you what's it's a shocking eye-opener, and I'll be interested to know and see what the people think in the comments section, to know that these counter-protesters, these anti-racist placards that you see, and anti-fascists, that it's not actually people doing it because they truly believe in it. It's a business and they're being paid / bribed to do it. So every sort of counter-protest you see, it's not because someone's got the lust and the passion and the desire to oppose the opposite view, because the views probably aren't opposite. They're paid to be there, which makes them the traitors, which makes them the cowards.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Because I'm not for sale.
No, and this is why they will never speak. You know, you see them on, like, when you see them getting interviewed in London, for example, and people start actually asking them questions. Like, the best one I ask is, there's a lot of Palestine marches at the moment in Swansea. It's every Sunday, guaranteed, all through the middle of Swansea, and they'll stop at the nearest, whichever shop is funding Israel, whether it be Barclays Bank or Zara or whatever, and they'll stand outside and they'll scream and shout, not let people in or out. So, you know, the Palestine lot are out quite a lot in Swansea at the moment. So I would ask them, you know, the simple question, you know, the song they sing, From the River to the Sea. So what river and what sea? Just tell me what the name of the river and the sea is. Which river and which sea? They have no idea. They do not know why they're there. Part of it is because they're there, they get paid. We know they get paid £30 an hour, free bus, free meal, you know, nice and cushy. When there's 100 of them, that's again, that's a bit of cash, like, you know. So we know for a fact that they earn a lot of money. There will be a few who are, and they're just outright Marxists, cultural Marxists, and they just, everything about Britain they hate, everything that we are proud of, they want to destroy, and it's done deliberately because they want to completely wipe out the history and start again. You know, that's just exactly what these cultural Marxists want. The problem we've got in Wales, though, is that they are, I say powerful, they scare people off, you know. So if we are holding an event, we're used to it. You know, I've got thick skin now. I can deal with anything that they say. But, you know, for someone to come along new to one of these events and see this lot, you know, it does put them off. So, you know, with them not being challenged by the police because of how they behave, which it should be, with the council not turning around and saying we're not associated with this lot, they got a license to do and say whatever they please.
When you were talking about the left not having an argument or not wanting to speak if they're being confronted or challenged, it just, a little memory popped into my head. You were outside an army camp or an army base in West Wales that was being transferred into a migrant camp, which we'll definitely go on to after that. Yeah. But you was outside reporting on it, and you had all the counter-protesters that seemed to be welcoming all these people. Into the army base, which is just the biggest insult you could possibly imagine, to get more to replace our fighting fit men with other people's fighting fit men we know nothing about. But there was someone saying to you, "You're a racist," and you went, "Oh, am I?" You went, "Prove it." And she said to you, "Well, why should I?"
Yeah, why should I have to?
It's like, well, because you're accusing me of being something I'm definitely not. And when you ask, well, can you prove it? It's like, well, I can't. Well, why fucking call me it then?
Yeah, why should I have to? You know, it's ridiculous. Isn't that obvious? You know, if you're going to make an accusation about someone, you should be able to back it up. I'd never make an accusation about someone I couldn't back up. But it just shows they got nothing there.
Yeah, me neither. It seems to be like their go-to. I mean, you see it. I'm new to X, but I've come back from X after being kicked off years ago.
Yeah.
And well, I was convinced that like racism didn't exist in the UK. I stand corrected. It does, and it's anti-white.
Yeah.
Like X is an anti-white platform. Even people that are white seem to be anti-white. It's like, what have I missed over the past few years?
Yeah.
But that's always their go-to. There'll always be an insult, and you'll go, okay, fine. Where's the evidence? And then they go quiet. So it's a funny old mess. I mean, if there was anything that steers me towards the centre right of politics, it's the fucking madness in the left. I just think the more and more I put leftism under the microscope, I feel it's a mental illness.
Yeah, you know, it goes way back to, you got the Marxist playbook, and it's, you know, the rules in the Marxist playbook for your opponent is to make them appear a bad smell. So no one wants to be anywhere near them. Call them a racist, call them a fascist. So, you know, this is straight out of the playbook. This is exactly why they do it. They're under instructions from their Bible, so to say, on how to treat people with opposing views. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
And so what is the army base story? It was in West Wales somewhere.
West Wales, Penally.
Did they manage to...
They did get in. Yeah, they actually did get into that one. The worst thing about that is that it wasn't a disused army base. It was used, you know, and the army base backed onto a load of houses, and it was a really lovely area. I think there was about, not many, I think it was about 200 people, if that. It could have been less. But the people who lived neighbouring the camp, you know, would have a good bit of banter with the army lads who were there. You know, they'd be shouting, "Oh, turn the music down, you know, keep your noise down, it's late. Oh, sorry, missus, whatever." And it was great. All of a sudden, these people, elderly people, a lot of them, you know, it's a retirement area, you know, it's a really nice area. And all of a sudden, their house is going to be backed onto this army camp, which is going to be full of men. And obviously, we said that this is going to be full of men. We broke this story. It was news to them all. We found out through the local meetings that were happening in the council that this plan that was shelved years ago is now being considered. So then we spoke to the Home Office. The Home Office confirmed that, yeah, we're going to be using it. So we broke that story. Because we broke that story, we, stirring the pot, stirring hate, racist, this, that, whatever, until the government, then the councils then announce, yes, that is happening. We are going to be using it. But it's going to be families. These people are professionals. And we're like, no, they're not. They're going to be all men. They're going to be able to ride on a dinghy. They're not going to be professionals at all. They're probably not even going to be able to speak English. But obviously, we're racist and hateful for saying that. Then they arrive. But the worst thing, there was big protests out there before they got there because we broke the story before they managed to get them in, which is, that is key. Once they're in, they're in. The laws change on what you can and can't do with protests. If they're not in, the laws are different. You can block entrances per se. But because we broke the news, the people were there. And this was the first big one in Wales where you had the whole town and community out against this sort of thing. And it's the first, some of the locals saying, I haven't seen a police car in 7 years. And now we got 50 lying in the street. What's going on? The police didn't know how to handle it. For them to get the men in, they actually kettled people against a fence. And I'm talking about 50 people, 60 people, and used a riot van, reversed a riot van into them very slowly, one slip. And then they bring out the dogs, and the dogs would be used to push back. So it was madness. And the people of that area had never seen anything like it in their life. And then they got them in. And then all of a sudden, certain things start happening. Snapchat messages we were told about with children, being messaged by men in the camp, come and meet us up the skate park. We got booze, cigarettes, we'll have some fun. And luckily, we got that message first, and we give it to the parents. We didn't publish it. We give it to the parents for them to deal with. And if they want to take it to the police, that's more important than, trying to boom a big story out of it. That happened. They were, a lot of drugs, a lot of violence inside. Because you got two different sects in there, and they hated each other. So it wasn't just a case of, these people are going to integrate. They're going to be nice. They hated each other themselves. The people in the camp. So there was weapons being made. There was riot vans having to go in. There was mass brawls. One of the cleaners had to lock herself in a cupboard because a load of them wanted to rape her. A load of the other people on the other side, the other sect, were trying to save her and protect her, and they protected her that she was in the cupboard, and you got 20, 30 men trying to get at her. So obviously we were just justified in our concerns with what was going to happen, and obviously these things then spill over into the local community. Luckily, this army base is about a 30-minute walk from the nearest town, so they couldn't really go far and get into the town until COVID hit and they started protesting and marching. And you may have seen the video. We went down there and we spoke to them and we asked them, why here? Why not France? What made you come here? And the omissions that they give, this is why this is why they don't want us to speak to these people, because they tell you the truth. What do you get here? Everything. Why do you prefer it here to France? We get nothing in France. You get everything here. Right, okay. Age of consent, the perfect one to speak. Oh, well, the thing is, because we're speaking about this Snapchat story, and we say, is this right? Do you think this was right? Well, as you know, in the UK, you can have sex age 12. And it's like, nah, no, you can't. So they are open to tell you. They told us that they were escaped from prison in their country. So they'd escaped from prison, dungeons and incarceration, made their way to the UK, and then being put up in an army base in West Wales.
I'm just picturing, because I heard an elderly person, their exact words were, this was once a peaceful place and now it's a war zone.
Yeah.
It sort of choked me up. I thought, the sacrifices the elderly have made to now be living in fear. 1 minute you're living 30 minutes from an army base where you think, do you know what? We've got our military there. That's like private security for us if the shit hits the fan. Yeah. Next thing, it's being flooded with very dangerous people, ex-cons that have fled their country. And I saw the police. I've seen footage of it. I was trying to think to myself, is this police brutality or is it on the verge? They certainly pushed the boundaries. I mean, they certainly weren't there to protect the community. They were very, what I saw, am I right, anti-community, trying to keep you in line for protesting against what's just about to come, which proved to be
100%.
hideous.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. One of the most, the saddest things we saw, it was a 78-year-old man, and he was at the back and he was struggling because he was having to build fences in his back because he loved looking over the camp, and it was a beautiful sight. You wake up in the morning, look at the window, full army camp in front of you. It was really nice. he was having to, he lived on his own, no family around him, trying to put up a fence, just to try and so they couldn't get in. And he's shaking while he's doing it. And he's like, I'm terrified. I've worked hard. These houses are, they're not cheap. The houses in Wales are a lot less than in England. So when these houses, I say like £600,000, that's a lot of money. You get nice properties for that in West Wales. These are houses that these people have worked their entire life for. All of a sudden, for a start, they were trying to sell their houses and the value had dropped by like £300,000. So almost half. And they just couldn't, they were stuck. And that was it, is that they were just stuck in the area. And the police, who are the community police for that area, no concern. None whatsoever. They didn't go knocking doors, asking people if they had any concerns. All they cared about was the orders they were given. Make sure you get them in that camp. And they did that. There was arrests. There were, dogs came out, riot vans being used. And they were absolutely anti-community, yeah.
You mentioned COVID. So what was COVID like in Wales?
We were lucky. Well, I say lucky. We only had one lockdown, but it was from start to end. We didn't come out of lockdown. We Mark Drakeford, he decided to announce it like two days before Christmas, I think it was, or 3 days before Christmas, literally the run up to Christmas. And he was like, at 8 o'clock tonight, everything's locking down, everything's going to be closed, and that was that. And it was like, right. So all of a sudden, everybody's rushing to the shops. Just a couple of days before, a week before Christmas, you need to get your last bit. So everybody was in the shops. It was, I would say, the worst, definitely the worst in the whole of the UK with the lockdowns. People were getting fines, police visits for going, a walk on your own. There's a lot of coastlines, South Wales. And there's nobody there. You can easily go for a walk. But you'd have police waiting in car parks, making sure if you got there, they tried to, where you going? I'm going for a walk. Not allowed to be out. There's a fine. You're going to get this through the post. Need to take your details. It was ridiculous.
No leniency.
No. Zero tolerance. Literally zero tolerance. And people just went along with it. And the Welsh, they seem to be quite obedient. I think things are changing now, but back then, I suppose a lot of people was. A lot of people didn't know what was going on. A lot of people were concerned.
I was going to say, has there been, since you've been speaking out and reporting on stuff that has been kept silent for so many years, have you seen a shift in Wales?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Noticeably.
Yeah. And when I say that, there's a lot more people. It's very easy to measure because these groups, the Stand Up to Racism, Wales Online and things like that, before they put a headline out about COVID or about us or about the far right or whatever, and the comments would all be, in line and in favour of Wales Online and their reporting. Today, these days, as soon as an article comes out, which is anything about the topics we discuss, you can just see the mood has changed. Nobody believes the media anymore. And so there's definitely been a shift in how people feel about... I think what they've done is the opposite of what they intended to do because they want to keep people out of politics. The spotlight that they've shone on themselves, the majority of people in Wales now are talking about politics. And they're talking about who they're going to vote for to get these politicians out.
They've had enough.
They've had enough.
And would you say that you were still public enemy number one or just public enemy?
Now? Oh, yeah, still public enemy. That's never going at it. We're always going to be public enemy number one. We're the only people in Wales that do it, see? You do get people who, they'll go and they'll film protests with their phones and things like that. We do things a little bit differently because, we work off... We're not just on the scene reporting on what's happening. We're talking about other stories. And we get the evidence first through freedom of informations, and then we present it, as a complete piece. So, as media and as journalists should. But again, we're the only ones in Wales that are actually doing that. You get some good online accounts who, they tweet stuff. There's one, Doge Wales, and they basically go into the government waste and what they spend their money on, wasting their money. But they're online accounts, right. Whereas we go to the coalface and we get to the front lines. We get in amongst the left, and I'd say it embarrasses the council showing up these people and how they act and calling out the lies that they're saying about people. It really embarrasses them.
And you live within the community that you're reporting on as well.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like I used to work the door. I've run a security firm, and I never mind it. A lot of people don't like working the door in their own town because one minute you're having problems with a gang of people, then you see them in Sainsbury's the next day, and the shit flows over.
Yeah.
Is that like that with you? Are you in a constant state of not distress, but
always
where's it coming from next?
Yeah,
whether you're at work or not.
Yeah, all the time because it is you know, because we're the only ones, you know, all of a sudden something big will happen in Wales. We'll report it. It'll go everywhere. You know, the people in Wales, they're looking for this sort of news now. The issue is the threats. You know, the amount of times I've had my home address sent to me by somebody saying, you know, we know where you live. You know, we'll see you soon and things like that. They've never come to the house yet, touch wood. But, you know, it's that, you know, you don't know who these people are. When you're walking around with my children, for example, you're always on alert because you know in Wales, it's funny. Wales is like a small community compared to England, obviously quite big. In Wales, it's quite controlled and the narrative is quite controlled. So when something does disrupt it, everybody's talking about it. So I think we have put a target on our back. What I would say, though, is now I'd say in the last 2 years, a lot more people will come up to us and say, "Your Voice of Wales, aren't you?" And they'll shake our hand. You're doing brilliant work. So we've seen a lot more positive today.
That must be nice.
It is, yeah.
That must be nice. But going back to the not so nice stuff, have you ever come under physical attack?
Oh, yeah, a few times, yeah. There's
I watched a woman punch you in the face,
Yeah.
but you dealt with that very well.
Yeah, just with the smile, innit? Just keep smiling, and that's the main thing. Just keep smiling, because you know, if they've got to a level of that anger, you know, you're getting under their skin. So that's fine. But you know, there's been a few times where they have come at us. They've come into our face all the time, every time, because they're trying to prompt a reaction. But you know, quite often, if we get amongst them, they're very tactical with what they do. You know, they'll punch you in the back and they'll grab, you know, fat on my back I didn't know it existed, like, you know, and they'll pinch and they'll kick and stuff like that, all under camera level, and it's in a crowd and the police are watching, so they get away with it that way. They never, you know, so anytime we know that we're going into the middle of that lot, which is, you know, as often as we can, we know we're going to get assaulted somehow, some way or another.
Well, here's something that makes me curious. If you're branded a racist media outlet or a racist person or a vile fascist, all the things that all the hit pieces that you've had painting you in a derogatory light. Yeah. And if you're branded a racist, and then I'm assuming that the BLM movement hit Wales. So how did you report on the BLM protests and mayhem and chaos? Yeah. If you're already branded a racist, you're going in at a loss already. Yeah. With
a stab vest for a start. You know, that is the levels that it got to, because this was, again, during lockdown. They were able to travel from all over the country, all over Wales. They even came from Bristol, all into Wales for a big demonstration for Black Lives Matter. They weren't questioned at all. But when we said, right, this is happening, we're going to go down, within, you know, days, there was messages coming in. If you come down, this is going to happen. If we see you, you're not going to be leaving the town, and all this, you know, loads of threats. And it wasn't just threats, you know, like, oh, we'll have a scrap or whatever. It was, we're going to end you, sort of thing. So we had to take them precautions, and you know, we had to get stab vests and go in amongst them. But again, you know, we still weren't going to stop going in and trying to speak to them. And funnily enough, when we did speak to them, most of them agreed with the things that we were saying. You know, so but again, it's that it's the divide and conquer, isn't it? You know, where you can't have the groups mixing. You need to have these two groups who want to go at each other. You know, and the people shaking that box and making them fight is the real problem. So they're desperate to call us racists. They're desperate to make sure that they don't want to associate or ever speak to us, because they know that probably if you actually speak to them on the level, you probably find quite a bit of common ground.
And you know what? This is a good opportunity for me to ask you what you've been accused of on a number of occasions. Yeah. Just outright, are you a racist?
No. No. You can ask the Pakistani Muslim boy that we got working with us, you know, see what he thinks. You know, there's lots of people around us who, you know, race is irrelevant to me. You know, it doesn't make a difference whatsoever. I judge people on if you're a good person, if you're a bad person. That is the level of judgment that I've got. You know, we could be saying, if, for example, loads of people were coming over to this country from someone who shares our values but fleeing no war, you know, and just literally coming over because they're going to get better benefits, they're going to be given everything for free, I'd be saying the same thing as I am now about the people who are coming across on dinghies. So it's not about race. You know, I would say I'm questionable of cultures. You know, I definitely believe that in the UK we've got a Christian culture. I'm not totally religious, I wouldn't say, but you know, our laws are based on the Ten Commandments and Christianity, and it's a good moral compass, so, you know, if nothing else. But when you know, I do question them when there's cultures that don't mix, and you know, the disruption of that will cause. You know, we're seeing it now in London. We're seeing MPs being elected on sectarian politics. You know, we're talking about Palestine and getting elected in London. You know, so it doesn't make sense. But yeah, I think ultimately it's always down to the character. You know, like Martin Luther, you know, today it's the opposite of Martin Luther King, isn't it? People are getting jobs because of the colour of their skin and not the content of the character. And I'm always about the content of the character. If you're a good person, you're a good person. If you're not, you're not.
Yeah, I think you and me are on exactly the same page, right the way down from being a potential cultural Christian to basing somebody on their character and code of conduct. It's got absolutely zero to do with skin colour. Although I don't get called that as often as I used to do.
Right.
I think people realise it has no effect on me at all.
Yeah, well, we've got the same problem that Tommy has got because, you know, the group Patriotic Alternative, you know, they do judge on the colour of the skin. They are racist, you know, they are, you know, and their own statements. There's loads of videos online which would say it, you know, everybody with dark skin need to leave this country. Doesn't matter if you're born here.
I've never heard of that group.
No, so they hate us, basically. They hate Tommy as well because we're not far right enough.
But yeah, I do know there's plenty of groups, but I don't give them any airtime or attention. But I know there's plenty of groups that don't like the likes of you and Tommy because you're not right enough.
Yeah.
So
and these groups.
So you can't really win. So you've got the left-wing lunatics, you're under attack by them, and then you've got the actual far right that hate you too because you're not far right enough.
Exactly right. And we go out of our way to make sure we do not associate with them. You know, we do not associate with them at all. We're not linked because they try, you know, the BBC done a hit piece not so long ago on us and it was nothing on us. They had nothing whatsoever, but it was the same night that they was doing it on Patriotic Alternative. So they were trying to tie us both in together.
Oh, I see.
So it was like, this is Patriotic Alternative Wales, this is Voice of Wales. They are separate people, but this is what they do, this is what they do. But a lot of people watching will go, they must be the same. You know, if they're on the same show at the same time talking about this sort of thing, they must be the same. So they try, the media and the establishment try to push us into the same box.
Yeah, the whole subconscious association.
That's exactly it.
When there's actually none.
Yeah.
But there you go, that's on the record now. You was arrested outside a COVID centre.
Yeah.
What on earth was that for?
So this was, I don't know if you remember, there was a lot of vaccine centres in England where people would go in, they were serving papers. You had military people going, serving papers. I don't know the ins and outs of all that. That was the activist's job. You know, we got court papers saying that the sheriff or something. I don't know. But our job was to go and report on it. It was the first time that anyone was doing it in Wales. We were made aware of it and we were invited to go down. So we went down, we interviewed the people first. And they were very polite. You know, they said, you know, I think a bit bonkers, like, but, you know, they weren't hostile. they were, you know, but they weren't hostile. They weren't aggressive. They weren't kicking off. They were nothing like that. But they did disrupt the day because they were at the door and, you know, they were speaking to the staff. The police were there and everything was being contained at the doorway. So the police kept them at the doorway. All of a sudden, Chief Inspector Martin Smith is called down. You don't get a chief inspector coming down to something like that, right? It's because Voice of Wales were there. That was it. So chief inspector comes down from his ivory tower, gets in a car, comes all the way over, and you can see he's there, and he's, you know, his chest puffed up. You've got the young PCs there, and he's there to impress. You know, he's walking up, and he's like, right, have you been inside? No. Right, can you go and stand over by there? Point into a wall. Can you go stand over by there and continue your protest over there in designated protest area? Some of them wouldn't move. So he was like, right, move them. And then we all moved. We did, because we listened to the police, okay? If we go to the police, we say, just let you know, here's our media pass, proper media passes as well, exactly the same as BBC, GB News and all that. And we showed them the media pass. We're not with the protest. We're just here filming. We're press. Okay, thank you. So then we move, as the police say to move, and one guy didn't. And because that one guy didn't move, Chief Inspector is like, arrest them all. So, you know, we're over by the place that we were told to stand in. There's one guy being kind of, not manhandled, just shrugged along a little bit. Orders given to arrest them all. And they come for us as well. They arrest me and Stan. And I say to the cop, it's like, we're pressed. We're not with this. You've asked me to move. I've moved. What do you mean? And she asked me, sit in the car, we'll try and sort it out. The body-worn footage comes out then, doesn't it? Because it goes to court. Body-worn footage shows that the chief inspector, he was like, close the door. Their body-worn cameras there filming the conversation. Chief Inspector, she said, they're press. What, press? Is it Voice of Wales? Yeah, they're not press. They're not press. Get him in the car. So he knew exactly who we were and what he wanted to do, which was to arrest us. We were then taken into custody. and we did spend 38 hours in the custody suite, which is worse than on remand. I'd rather do 38 hours on remand where you've got a little bit of communication and locked in a box for all that time wondering what's going on. The charge was failure to leave or aggravated trespass. That's what they first said when they first arrested us for aggravated trespass. We were in a cell about 6 or 7 hours into that stint in custody. Another officer comes in. I'm thinking, we're going home. Happy days. They've seen we're not doing anything. We're going home.
It all seems a bit over the top as
mental.
Up until now.
I even, I was allowed to have my phone, and my partner at the time, we were going to a party in the night, and I messaged her, so I just let we've been arrested. It's nothing to worry about, though. I'll probably be out in a couple of hours and be back. So that time goes. It's 10 o'clock at night. We're sitting in a cell. Police officer comes in, and I'm like, is that it? Then we go in. She's like, right, I need to read you this, but you'll be further arrested on suspicion of fraud. I was like, fraud? She's like, what are you talking about, fraud? And she wouldn't give me anything. She just read me my rights and then went. And that was it. So then you're sitting there then, and I'm thinking, what could it be? I had 2 driving licenses. When you move house and you apply for another driving license. So I had 2 with one my old address and one my new address. So I'm thinking, is that what they're trying to do? I couldn't understand it. So it went on 39 hours. We had to give our statements. Me and Stan were able to sit in the same room and give a prepared statement. And then we did a good 2 hours and no comment interview. We found out then that they'd actually raided our houses the night before.
That was the fraud charge to get the warrant.
Yes, absolutely right. We also found out that the reason they charged us with fraud was by using the other people's papers. So the papers that they were trying to serve on the vaccine centre were fraudulent, apparently. But me and Stan were the ones who were being charged for fraud. When they knew, they were crystal clear that we were media, we were totally separate from it, but they just wanted it to get into the house. And they do it deliberately. So 1:30 in the morning is when they did my house. My partner at the time was there. My daughter was 3 at the time, and my partner at the time was pregnant. She was 2 months pregnant. The police obviously walking around the house trying to take all the electronics, anything, tripods, paperwork, they rinsed the house. Luckily, the stuff that we needed was elsewhere anyway. My laptop and other phones, things like that were elsewhere. So they didn't actually manage to get anything. But while they were there, 1:30 in the morning, outside in the middle of the street, blue lights going the entire time they're there. All of the neighbours there thinking, what the hell's going on? You got people raiding this house, my house.
Were you scared? In a sense of, was there any fear that they could be setting you up for something you've not done?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So when I found out they'd been in the house, we had friends go around with, the bug detectors and things. And it might sound like it's being paranoid or whatever, but unfortunately, it's not impossible that they would do something like this,
When you've had Hope Not Soap hound you for years, anything's possible.
Anything's possible. So we had people come in and they did go around the house and they checked for bugs, things like that. And there wasn't anything there. But, the concern is that they deliberately use that document that they know is nothing to do with us in order to gain access to our properties. Now, luckily, like I said, the things that they were after, they wasn't there. But if they had been able to get that, they'd get, if the police have your phone, they've got all of your conversations, all of the messages you've got between friends, family, and worse of all is, as journalists, we get a lot of people coming to us with important information, private information.
And sensitive.
Very sensitive, yeah. And sometimes about the police, sometimes about the council, sometimes about social services. So it's very much in line with why they'd want to get their hands on it.
Yeah, that whole phony fraud charge was for that.
Absolutely, fishing. Absolutely right. And they knew, because then we probably go into it in a moment, but at the end of when it did come to court, the charge was failing to leave the land. So we went from aggravated trespass to aggravated trespass and commit two accounts of fraud to failing to leave the land. So it was literally all for nothing, failing to leave. That's what all that came down to. That's the only thing they could try and pin on us to try and get the conviction, was failing to leave the land. So, but the goal was to get that information, but also stop Voice of Wales, because the conditions that we had on us was, me and Stan couldn't communicate, we couldn't talk, we couldn't do anything. We weren't allowed onto certain social media sites. And it was basically to stop Voice of Wales. Stan is an animal when it comes to emails. He can sit there and he'll write a stinker, and he will, like a dog with a bone, he'll get what he wants done. So he whittled it down and we got the conversations, and it was, Stan was saying, well, he's my carer. He's company. He helps with my mental health. We spend time together. We go out. We go shopping and all this stuff. So then they were like, right, well, we can't let you see each other because you could start discussing the case.
Oh, were these your bail conditions?
These are some of the bail conditions. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So part of your bail conditions were you can't see your business partner.
Yeah. Mad. But, I get that if there's a case, you can collude and, there's maybe, it's a very thin, where I'd accept that. But then when Stan started arguing back, they were like, right, you can go for coffees, you can go shopping, you can do your socialising with Dan, but you can't do Voice of Wales. That was it. You can't do Voice of Wales. So we're okay to collude then, yeah? So we can go for coffee, we can go for tea, we can go shopping and talk to our heart's content about the case, but we're just not allowed to do Voice of Wales. Stan, like I said, he's a dog with a bone. He got all the bail conditions wiped out in the end. And the only thing we had to worry about was the court case that was going to be coming up and the equipment that they did take on the day. So, my phone, things like that they keep for as long as possible. I think it was about 8 months, I think they managed to keep all our stuff for.
I mean, I know it wasn't crime of the century, but just out of interest, how did you prove your innocence?
So my equipment was in the front seat. So the first thing I thought is I need to get that memory card, because they're going to keep this and this is my evidence. I wasn't under arrest. They had taken my stuff, but I hadn't been read my rights. So I took the memory card, I put it in my pocket. I thought they probably search me when I get back to the police station. If they find it, they find it. So that's that. Went to court and the body-worn footage was shown. The chief inspector was wheeled in and the judge disliked us from the start anyway. Chief inspector walked in and she was like, she was fawning over him. So, you're so high up, you don't have numbers, do you? You just get the pips. And she was flirting with him. He made the statement. They were aggressive. They were waving microphones around. They were shoving cameras in people's faces. They were threatening this, that and whatever. But the body-worn camera obviously wasn't on us at this point because he arrived late. The point of failing to leave the land is he said that because we were being so aggressive and violent and because we were being so bad, we were told to leave. We have to leave, and you refused. You refused to leave when you were given an order. And I was like, we've never asked to leave. You asked us to stand over there. You asked us to stay, actually. If you asked us to leave, you'd be telling us to leave the area. You asked us to stay in the area by saying, go stand in that protest area. No. I didn't say that. And it was, his written statement said it. He's in the box testifying, this didn't happen. They're not telling the truth, making out that we're lying to the judge. And the judge is scowling at us, because how dare we say that this decorated officer is lying. They played his body-worn footage and it wasn't clear. She played it over and over and over again. And we're sitting there. I can hear him saying, if you'd like to protest, go stand over there in the designated area. I can hear it clear, but I know what he said. The woman, the judge, was like, I don't know, I can't quite hear it. Let's play it again. Try it from a different angle. Can we put the volume up? And they were going over and over and over. And she was like, no, I can't hear him clearly saying for you to stay on the land. I can't be sure. I've just got to take his word for it, because he's a chief inspector, that you were asked to leave and you refused. But then our barrister, luckily, we had we got someone down from London to come and represent us, and he was really good. It's important you get a barrister outside of the country, because all the barristers in Wales, all the solicitors, they want to be barristers, they want to be judges, and you don't want to go up against a judge if you want to be a judge, so you're going to be nice and you're going to play. So we had to go to London. The memory card that I had, luckily, was perfect. It was perfect camera with a microphone to the mouth of the police inspector when he said it. And he clearly says, if you would like to protest, please go and stand over there in the designated protest area. So he lied, absolutely lied under oath to the judge. He lied in his S9 statement. The judge turned around to the chief inspector and she was like, would you like to go outside and think about what you've just said? And he was like, yes, okay. So me and Stan walked out. Stan gave him a dressing down. He gave him a bollocking in the corridor, this chief inspector. He had a row for that when we went back in, but he was justified. Chief inspector came back in and the judge says, okay, so what would you like to say? Yeah, I did ask him to stay. I did ask him to stay on the land. And the judge was like, right, okay, yeah, you did. Now, just to let you know, talking to us, you still would have been charged if they had done it different. If they had charged you under something else, I'd be sending you to prison right now. That's what she told us. She said, I'd be sending you down for 3 months. Not, oh, yeah, you were right. You didn't do anything wrong. You followed the orders of the chief inspector. And not, why didn't she have a go with that chief inspector for ultimately perjuring himself in the box, you know. So we were very lucky, because if I didn't have that memory card, we would have been sent down, and she told us as much.
What a mad thing to say in her summary. Not sorry for the inconvenience.
Well, it got worse, actually. I forgot about this, but she's summarising the case then, and she's saying that, you know, the prosecution are going to say this, your barrister is going to say this, and she's going through the summary, and she's basically saying, your barrister is now going to ask me to drop the case because the charges have been brought to you, don't line up with the blah, 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 and unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with him. What do you mean, unfortunately? Unfortunately, you're going to have to agree with him. No, fortunately, justice has been done, and this has all gone the way it should have done, not unfortunately. So she was totally on side with the police, and as can be expected, I suppose, in this. And it wasn't she was pleased that the right verdict came. She was disappointed that the right verdict came. And it was unfortunate that she wasn't able to send us to prison.
I mean, you're going to have to tread carefully, aren't you? You've got to really, really box clever and not...
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the whole thing you do is push in the boundaries, because if you want the truth, you've got to dig deep, and you have got to push the boundaries. But, yeah, you've really got to have your wits about you to make sure that you don't leave yourself wide open so you can be stitched up, because we now know that happens. Yeah. We've seen it time and time again.
Very luckily, we've got a great guy who's been with us from the start. He's an ex-police inspector. He retired a little while ago, and when we first started with the DFLA, he was there on our first meeting, and he's been with us ever since. And he's our legal, you know, he guides us. You know, if there's anything we're not sure about, we'll ask him. He'll tell us exactly what the best way to go is, and that's what we'll do.
That's nice and reassuring. I want to talk to you about the Strady Park hotel story. Well, the Strady hotel and spa 4-star resort.
Yeah.
Just insane story.
Yeah.
We'll probably end the interview on that story.
Yeah.
But before we get to that one, because I'm sure people will be very interested in that, even people that remember the story, that were there outside the hotel, and people that don't know the story, they're going to be interested too. But before we get to that part, all the madness that you've had to engage in and all the attacks that you've come under and having your house raided, I mean, that isn't normal behaviour. Like your average Joe that goes to work 9 till 5, pays his taxes, they don't get their doors kicked in at 1:30 in the morning when there's children and pregnant women. It's just not nice. No. It's a horrible environment, and it's very unfair. But has all that madness affected your relationship? Are you still with the mother of your children?
No, it has affected it ultimately, because it is full time, and it's, you know, not just the time that, say, she was in work, I'd be with the kids. When she's home, I'd be out doing Voice of Wales stuff. It wasn't just the fact that we didn't spend time together because of it. It was the stress, you know, like in COVID, the police were at our door twice a day sometimes, and they, you know, bang in the door. It's stupid, you know, gone midnight, they'd be banging the door to give us fines and court dates and stuff, which we won all of them, by the way. But ultimately, it came down to, you know, we can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. You know, we're either going to do this with Voice of Wales, or you could do the family stuff. And I had to pick Voice of Wales, because I do Voice of Wales because of my kids. You know, I've got 4 kids, and I don't live with guilt well. You know, I struggle. If I got any form of guilt, I struggle. And I think everybody's going to come to a point, if the shit hits the fan and things go wrong and they go the way that we're worrying that they're going to go, every single person's got to look their kids in the eye, and they got to say, I tried everything I could. And I can't be in a position where I can't say that, where I can't, but I know right now I can say that to my kids. I can say I tried everything. So it was a no-brainer for me. It was, you know, this is more important, because it isn't just me, my life, my kids. It's or everybody's. You know, this is affecting everybody, and we're the only people calling this out. You know, it felt like it's a duty. You know, we had a duty to do it. So yeah, it does take its effect.
Tough decision that is.
It is. It is. It was the right decision, I'd say, because I couldn't. I don't think I could physically stop. You know, with what you're seeing online all the time, I couldn't close my eyes to it now. You know, I couldn't be quiet about it. I couldn't not do something. You know, and I think this is that little bit of something. I mean, okay, it might not be a great deal, but we're trying. You know, we're trying our best to get the truth out and warn people of the problems that are coming. And to me, you know, that's more important than anything. You know yourself. You know. There's a lot of sacrifices people got to make when they step into this world, and unfortunately that was one of them.
Yeah, I totally get that, and I've kind of got the same motivation. In 30 years' time, when I'm sitting around the family table and the country has completely been replaced with just madness, crime rate off the scale, no one's safe to leave the house after a certain time, no-go zones, like the direction that the country's going. You can kind of see it if you look back over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And I've said to everyone around me that says to me, aren't you concerned about speaking out? It's like, and I don't claim to be frontline military, but it's like, if I can do a little bit, if I can do a teeny weeny little bit and it rubs off on somebody else and they feel compelled to do the same thing like you, we have got a fighting chance. And if it doesn't go our way, at least when I'm 75 years of age around the table, I can look everybody in the eye and say, I tried to do the best I could. I tried to do a little bit without getting myself sent to jail to make a bit of a change so that really you and your future generations have a much better life. Because I've had a great time now. My life could end tomorrow. And I generally mean that. It's like, I'm cool. It's not really going to affect us like it's going to the next future generations. And I think it's important that people become a little bit selfless and actually think, get rid of the I'm all right Jack attitude. It's kind of a leftist attitude, but...
No, you're right. And, I said to you earlier on, in the military, the war was very prominent in my family. My grandfather had 7 brothers, one Royal Marine Commando, sergeant, paratroopers, prisoners of war, and all growing up, all I'd have is the military. And, being told stories about this, Swansea was heavily bombed in the Blitz because of the docks. So, they lived through it. And, you see, VE Days just passed, a perfect example, where you had young men lying about their age to go and die, and they knew they weren't going to come back. So, I always compare it to that, what their men were like now and what the men today. I get it that people are going to, they could lose their job. I get it. I get it that people have got commitments, financial commitments, mortgages and things. I get that. But none of it's going to mean anything, if we end up where we're worried about it going. If everybody spoke up, little things, everybody sent a message to the MP and said no. But that seems too much trouble, these days, which is hard. And again, I get it. People don't want to put the target on their back. But if everybody stood up, it is that, I am Sparta sort of thing. It's a different story, and I think we'd be in a different place. So I do get it, why people wouldn't do it. But if everybody started to speak up, I think things would be solved quite quickly.
I totally agree. I mean, Starmer tried his best to make sure everyone stays silent forever after the Southport disturbance, shall we say. It hasn't worked, luckily. No. They're just boxing clever. They're just changing their terminology and they're not using, they're softening their words, but they're still saying something. Yeah. I disagree. I don't like it. I condemn that. Yeah. And we should really leave out the clauses, and I've kind of got to that stage now where I'm not racist, but I don't, but I'm not Islamophobic, but it's like, do you know what? Cut that bullshit. Yeah. Because it doesn't make an ounce of difference anyway. No. Just say exactly how you feel, and if everyone follows suit, then who knows? We may be able to turn the country around and also live harmoniously with the people that we've been purposely made to fight against, because most people are decent people. Yeah. It's those fuckers at the top.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's they're divide and conquer.
Criminals.
Yeah. Perfect analogy. I seen it before and I thought it was brilliant. Red ants and black ants don't get on, put them in a box and they won't fight. Shake the box, they'll fight until one of them wins. You've got one of them completely wiped out. It's the person shaking the box that we've got, we've got to be mindful of. The people who are pulling the strings. Our politicians aren't in charge. We all know that. It comes from above again.
Yeah, when Joe Biden was in power, that really confirmed it for me. Yeah. There's no way that son of a bitch is making any kind of decision.
No. Yeah. He can't even decide what shoes to wear.
He doesn't even know what time of day it is, and he's wearing a watch. Yeah. So, Strady Park, tell me that story from start to finish. And describe Strady Park for people that don't know it. It's a beautiful hotel. Yeah.
I used to do wedding photography, and we've been to that venue a number of times. It's a beautiful wedding venue. Lovely halls, lovely surroundings. It's so lovely. And the area that it's in, Furness, 400 people live in that area, and that is a jewel in the crown of the town. Llanelli, the bigger area,
brings in tourists.
Absolutely, rugby is big in Wales. You've got the Scarlet Stadium just down the road. People would go to that hotel when they're travelling down. People would have functions, events, Christmas, whatever. It was a very busy, successful hotel and something that the local town could be proud of. They had a nice spa, jacuzzi. We went in there and had a look around. One of the staff contacted us and told us, so like we do, we got the cameras on, we go into reception because it was still open, ask for the manager comes down, we've got these reports, can you give us any information on it?
And
Is it true?
What were the reports?
Reports were that it was going to be closed and it was going to be used to house 300 migrants, male migrants, in a town of 400 people. So that's pretty big. That's a massive change in that area alone. And that's just not even including the facilities, the job losses and things like that, because over 100 staff were working there. They all lost their jobs, apart from one or two that were kept on. But we went in and we spoke. The manager said, no, it's not true. It's just a rumour. It's not true. Right, okay. So then we went to walk into the spa and we had a little look around, and I was filming the spa, the saunas, the steam rooms. It was lovely. And we spoke to the girls at the spa and we said, we've been told this. Is this true? Yeah, we had a meeting about it this morning. So did you? Was it with this manager by any chance? Yeah, Tom, his name is. Yeah, that's him. Oh, so the guy just told us it's not true, it's not happening. You had a meeting with him this morning. Yeah. It's 3 days' time, we're out of a job. So, right, okay. So that was enough for us then to go and report. So we went outside the hotel and we just said, this is what we've been told. This is what the manager said. This is what some other staff members have said. Up to you. The whole town turned out. People came from everywhere. The protests that went on for 100 days, 24 hours. This wasn't, a couple of people turning up every Saturday or something. 24 hours. They had a marquee. They had local businesses bringing food, and I mean, they could have opened a supermarket with the amount of stuff that they had there. But there was always someone manning the protest area. There was always someone there watching. There was so many issues that happened in that hotel, and the first one would be the security that came in. The migrants never got in. I could say that with the determination that the protesters had, the local community, there was no way that they were able to let there's a few weather problems where the fires broke out. I think it was lightning or something at the back of the hotel, and a fire happened. The electrics were cut for the hotel, and so there was a lot of shenanigans going on, and the security were getting a bit fed up. They were called Lead Element, and they were ex-veterans. They were ex-forces, and they were the ones that were guarding the hotel, and they were getting rather angry with the fact that they were failing their mission. Their mission was to keep the hotel clear, make sure it's safe for the arrival of these people. Because of the way that it went down, for example, night comes, music would be blasting, and then it turned into, they play interrogation music and stuff, so it'd be babies crying, gone midnight, babies crying, windows smashing, and when the windows are smashing, there was people with slingshots, so it was constant, it was constant attack on the hotel and a constant attack from the hotel on the protesters. The security firm, they tried to flood the hotel because they give up and they left, right? So before they left, they smashed all the sinks, put the taps on in the rooms, funneled the water down to try and flood out the camp as well, but it didn't work. It just went straight into a drain, and then they left. So for, I think it was about 14 hours, the taps were just running in the hotel, and it was just going to destroy it. But people then would not let the police get to the stopcock, for example, the bit at the front, because it's obviously they're not trained to do it. It's a big grate that they try and open with their asp, and it's dangerous, health and safety problems, So people, for the police's own safety, sit on the drains and not let them turn the water off. So there's all that sort of stuff going on constantly. Now, they'd have drive-bys where the whole community, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that would turn up for these things. The bikers, the local biker gangs, they'd come down, and they all, stormed the hotel, went in through the gates, and they didn't do anything. They weren't violent or didn't do anything. They just went in, drove around, and then parked up, and that was that. But it was the presence, their presence there. You ever see the bikers anywhere? They come with a big, strong presence, And
it's constant pressure applied.
Yes, and that was it. It was, as Stan would call it, the buggeration factor. When they wanted businesses to bring in all the beds, for example, they wouldn't let the cars or the lorries in. They'd find out who the local people, the businesses are. They'd be ringing the local businesses. Do you know what you're doing? The businesses would turn away and they'd go. So the frustration that the Home Office must have had, and Clear Springs, because even trying to get any kit in, they couldn't do it. It was just impossible. It was a stalemate, and it was really frustrating for the staff. But the issue is this is a community of people. Swansea isn't a community anymore. Honestly, people would see that their neighbours are being robbed and they do nothing because they're not getting involved in that. Whereas Llanelli, it is, everybody's your brother and sister. They're a strong community. You hurt one, you hurt us all. And that's what they didn't anticipate.
That's what we're lacking in the West.
And that's deliberate. That's what Swansea used to be a community. Where I live now. I've lived my entire life, and I know all my neighbours. You could go knock a door. You could go, just walk in and whatever. It's changed. Nobody speaks to anybody. There's cameras everywhere. Nobody trusts anybody. So it's deliberate to destroy the community. You wouldn't get the pushback like you had in Llanelli. The protest, like I said, went on 100 days, and it was the people who would man it in the night were older ladies. It wasn't as Nigel Farage would say, tattooed knuckle dragging thugs and all that. It was the ladies. They call them the knitting crew because it was the pensioners. They'd be there and they'd just be sitting there knitting away, and they were the far right. They were knitting balaclavas, but no, they weren't really. But the people, it was just normal people power that won that whole thing. Because on the 100th day, because we knew that there was a review coming up, because we speak to the Home Office quite often on it, we rang back on a morning, 10th of October, 10:10, and they'd said, yeah, we're pulling out. The hotel, it can't go on anymore. It's not safe, so we're not going to do it. We can't go ahead. So we obviously broke that then as well, that the Home Office has finally pulled out. And it's the first hotel that's happened to, because it wasn't through anything other than the grit and determination of the protesters, and full credit to them. People said that they were really pleased that because again, this is why it's important to have alternative media, because we were on the front lines all the time. When Wales Online would say, put out the headline, community unites to support 300 men going into the hotel, community did not unite to support anybody. We were there on the front line, video and everything is going on, saying, well, they're not supporting anything. This is why it's really important. And we were able to get it to people like Patrick Christie's on GB News, who had us on the show quite often to give updates on it. But it was that determination and that community spirit that won the battle. And it was a battle. There's people writing books about it, because there's a lot more that I could go into. There's some of the things that happened through the nights. The security would come down, they'd be intimidated, and they were threatening with knives. Police did nothing. They never did anything. But they didn't back down. They just did not back down.
Yeah, that's a great story, and it really gives hope. And it's also, there's a hard and fast message in there that community matters. And as soon as that starts to crumble, as with the family unit, everything around you will fall to pieces and we lose.
Yeah.
We have to pull together. Have you been back to the hotel since it's been reopened as a hotel?
Yeah, well, we did, yeah. The protest was going to stay.
I'm going to stay there. When I come and see you, I'm going to come up there and I'm going to stay there.
Well, the rule is in that area is nobody's putting money in that till, because it is a different owner now.
Scrap that. Yeah. I'm never going there, and don't anybody watching this ever stay there. Tell me why.
Yeah, so I've
changed my mind.
Yeah, so it was quite strange how it worked out, because it was owned by a group, Clear Springs. You probably heard of them. They're the ones that are all over the news at the moment for overcharge and everything. Clear Springs and SBHL. So it's then owned. They were selling the rooms. So they'd say, right, we need some investors. So you buy that room, you buy that room, you buy that room. I can't remember the exact number, but it was 15, maybe thereabouts, separate investors who had just bought rooms to profit off, because they knew the migrants were going to be going in there. So they couldn't just sell a hotel. They couldn't get rid of it. The local community, the left, were like, right, okay, we've won. We've got our hotel back. Let's go and spend our money in there. The community, or the actual community, the ones that live there, saying, what, you want to line the pockets of the people who tried to destroy our town? No chance. Interestingly, that hotel has now been taken over by, I can't remember his name. He is a Muslim man, but he's very friendly with George Galloway. He's the Workers' Party of England, or Workers' Party of Britain. They're very much sectarian politics, very much Palestine, Gaza. He owns the hotel now.
You completely lost me when you said George Galloway.
Right.
That's when I knew I'm never going to that hotel.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, we did mention that this is who this guy is. This is who the party he represents is. This is George Galloway. This is who George Galloway is. Then the new owner of the hotel puts out a video basically threatening us with legal action if we do if we slander him or say anything derogatory about him. And he would. He's got a bit of money. He wouldn't have a problem in taking us to court. But the hotel is struggling. I know that. I know that it doesn't have anywhere near as much custom as it used to have. And I think it's a message, there's a lot of people who will sell their soul for a bit of cash.
Go woke, go broke.
Exactly. The people,
because it was
don't
beautiful.
Forget. Stunning.
I can only picture it from before the madness.
Yeah. And people have got memory. They cancelled weddings. This was at the drop of the hat. People had a wedding the following week.
Yeah, 100
cancelled.
100 people unemployed overnight.
Yeah.
That's shit behaviour.
Really poor, and they won't forget. But there are a lot of people who did have weddings there, were getting married there, and what they did when they took over the hotel was gut it. They ripped the walls down. They were chucking the beds out of the windows. It was a pile of rubbish. And what people saw that as, nice chandelier, for example, lovely chandelier out the window, smashing to bits. People remember that chandelier at their wedding. Things like that. But the disrespect that was shown to the community by the owners of that hotel, it will never be forgotten.
Yeah, old sins cast long shadows. What's the biggest threat to Wales right now?
Well, us apparently, according to Mark Drakeford, we're the biggest threat to modern day Wales. That's what he said. That's why we got banned off YouTube. He lobbied YouTube. We didn't do anything wrong. He lobbied them and said, you need to get them off because they're a threat to modern day Wales. So every time we saw him, that's what we'd ask him. Are you a threat to modern day Wales? And I'm pleased to be a threat to modern day Wales because modern day Wales is not Wales. It's not the Wales that we know and love. The biggest threat, though, actually, to Wales is Labour, Plaid Cymru. That cooperation, collaboration that they have. You've got the Plaid Cymru, just to put it into perspective, they are Welsh supremacists, they're nationalists, and they actually collaborated with Hitler in the war. They were calling themselves, the Plaid Cymru nationalists is Welsh Nazism. So, this is who we've got in power in Wales. Sister party, Sinn Féin IRA. And then you've also got the Labour Party, who are, again, out-and-out communists, nanny state. The Labour Party we've got in Wales is more radical than the one in England as it stands. But that is 100% the biggest threat to Wales. It's the only reason we're in a mess is because of our government.
And are you going to keep fighting for Wales?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Never going to stop.
With every fibre of your being?
Yeah. I've got to look my kids in the eyes and say I did everything, and I have to be able to say that truthfully. Yeah, absolutely.
I can only respect a man like that. Where can anybody watching or listening find you?
So we've got a website, voiceofwales.com. A lot of our content goes on there. Our biggest platform, I would say, is X, at VO Wales Official, and the Rumble as well. So Rumble is Voice of Wales. You can find us on there. That's our YouTube, because we're not allowed on YouTube, banned for life. So Rumble is our YouTube, so you can find us there.
Okay, we'll put Dan and Stan's description links in our description. If you've made it to the end of this interview and you like what you hear and you're actually shell-shocked by some of the things that go on that you never get to see or read about because it's swept under the carpet, remember to like and subscribe to the channel so I can keep having these conversations. The bigger the channel, the bigger the guests, the more interesting the story, and the more truth we can just permeate out into the atmosphere. I appreciate you coming on. Please tell Stan he's invited, and I look forward to seeing him. And for you and the team that are behind us, I wish you nothing but good health.
Liam, thank you very much for having us. Really appreciate it.
It's a joy.
Nice
Cheers,
one.
brother. Thank you.